Well, I have a new project. It needs a lot of work. No idea if it runs. It shifts good, gets into neutral, it turns over, but I'm probably still gonna strip it down to the valves at least and check things out. I mean, it needs a lot. I think the rear bearings are shot. There's play in the wheel. You can feel it. It moves around. Needs new sprockets. Needs a chain. Definitely needs new fork seals. Probably just rebuild the forks. You can see this thing is. Look at that shit. I don't know if this is even tight. This is all loose, so the bearings up front might be shot too. Who knows if the radiator leaks or if it even runs. Guy said he had cams in it, but I don't even know if that's true. And I don't think he rejetted the carbs and everything for the cam, so who knows. I'm probably gonna rebuild the carb, and yeah, it needs a ton of work. Who knows if it even runs, but yeah, I mean, when I have spare time after work, I'll be just slowly disassembling it and seeing how things go. All right, update on the bike. So one of the first things I noticed is that the front wheel, and I should have freaking caught this when I was looking at the bike. I just didn't think about it, but I noticed the front forks wouldn't compress very well at all. Well, it turns out this front rim is not a Yamaha. This does not fit this bike at all. And so this is bent. So I ordered another one of these, and then I ordered a new rim that's actually a Yamaha rim. I don't know what this is. It could be a Honda or Kawasaki or Suzuki, but it isn't a Yamaha. So I ordered that, and then that definitely freed up the forks immediately. That was the issue, so that should fix most of the front end stuff. Still a lot of uncertainty if the carb needs to be gutted and cleaned or if it needs new jets. It looked pretty clean when I looked inside. It looked like it had seen some pretty dirty days, but as is right now, it looked like it would run just fine. But I don't really know until I try it. So the previous owner said he had someone had put in cams. I'm guessing he did. And so I'm like, just to double check, I'm gonna check the timing. And I've kind of been running into an issue because he also put aftermarket covers, and the OEM covers have a hole right around here that you check the top dead center with. And because this doesn't have that hole and that notch in it, how do you check top dead center, So how you do that is there's a couple ways, but just to double check everything, you can take out the spark plug and stick in like an Allen key, and then you can see when it goes to the very top and stops. So that's the first way. And then obviously in the service manual, you can approximately, the notch is right about here. And I have this turned a little bit, so it's right about here. And it's not this H mark, it's the I mark. And yeah, the top dead center is right about here. So, and if you notice, neither cam is at top dead center. They're one tooth off on each one. You can see the notch there and there. They're just like one tooth off. So I'm 95% sure both cams are one tooth off. That would explain him having trouble trying to run it and probably selling it. So we're gonna change that, and I would say I'd be worried about the valves hitting the piston, although I think I'll get lucky, and the reason is on my R6 I ran into issues with the cam chain tensioner, and I ended up jumping 2 teeth on my intake valves, and it still didn't hit the cylinder. I don't know how. But anyway, so 1 tooth on each I really don't think is a big enough deal to hit the piston. So I'm gonna loosen the cam chain tensioner, pop it over 1 tooth, which is probably easier said than done. There's a lot of shavings and stuff. I don't know if that's because of the stators right here, and so there's going to be more shavings because it just, it's magnetic and it attracts some more stuff here. That's a little worrisome, but I mean, overall the engine doesn't look too bad. I'm gonna finish draining the oil. Well, parts are finally starting to come in, so just random things like replace that, maybe some fork seals, some of the stuff for the clutch to replace these screws which aren't the right size, oil filters, things like that. So I'll be able to work on that a bit today. So I got the new oil filter in. One random tip is when you're putting in a new oil filter, they have a spring right here. You can see that. Sometimes when these oil filters have been sitting, even though they're great, that spring, whatever's behind there, kind of gets stuck a little bit just because it's sat for so long. So whenever you put these in, I always like to put a drop of oil on here. Just gently press that down and kind of get that loose. The one I did, the new one that I put in, when I pushed it down, it kind of had some resistance and then it popped open. And you don't want your engine trying to push that open. You know, you want to make sure that's nice and clear. And then I put a little bit of oil before I put it in. So yeah, the new oil filter's in. That's the old oil filter. You can see how they kind of jury-rigged this. So I got new springs because these springs were out of spec. I got Barnett springs and new screws as well. So I'm going to measure these and make sure they're the right diameter and the right length to be in spec, and then I'll put these in and put the cover back on. Usually, if this is like the original gasket, you definitely want to replace this, but sometimes, most of the time, you can get away with reusing this, especially if it's in good shape and it's been replaced recently, which it looks like it has. Another update on the bike. Just put on the chain. The rear tire was a bit loose, but turns out it was just this nut loose. It seems to have all the spacers and everything, and the bearings look okay. Put on a used OEM sprocket, but it has probably like 90% of its life left, so I'm not too worried about it. And I put a used front OEM sprocket that also has about 90% of its life left. A few little issues here and there. I did get it started. It was leaking oil out of this oil line. Pulled off that line, and the O-ring was super small. It's also leaking oil from the neutral sensor right here. But yeah, that's mostly it. It seems to be the carb is a little bit iffy. It is, you know, pretty old bike, but it's leaking a lot from right here, which usually means that the floats aren't going up and shutting off a valve that stops the fuel. So maybe it's just a matter of it needs to run a bit and kind of flush things out, but not a huge deal. Oil level looks good. No leaks unless that one I just worked on isn't fixed. So the gas tank, this on the gas tank, this O-ring is not something you can just get at the store, so waiting on that part to come in is completely toast. So I'm gonna just replace all of this, but because it's leaking fuel when I turn it to the on position, it's just not very wise to run this thing around when it's leaking fuel everywhere. Besides that, clutch feels good. I think the forks probably need to be rebuilt. The seals are probably done at this time, but I kind of want to run it a little bit just before I do all that work and stuff on the bike. Yeah, besides that, lots of little things to go over and run through, but I think it's getting close to the point where you take it for a spin. back from the first ride. A lot of fun. Had some issues starting it at first, and then I ran out of fuel because there's a gaping hole, or several gaping holes up here on the top left of the fuel tank inside here. You can't really see it, but there's, or maybe you can. Those holes right there just gush out fuel. I don't know how those got there, but anyway, still needs a lot of work. Yeah, I need some springs for the exhaust. Definitely needs new fork seals. They gave out as soon as I strapped it down in the truck. So it's leaking a lot of fork oil. At first, I was thinking it had a pretty good oil leak from this seal, which you can see it's a little bit wet right here, but it's really not that bad. And also, I kind of filled it up with a little too much oil, so I'm wondering if it just had a little bit of excess pressure. But overall, really happy. Still needs a lot. Needs new gaskets on this thing. I need to fix the leak in the gas tank. I think there's supposed to be like a roller right here that it's missing, and just other little things. It probably could use new fairings. The ones on these are super beat. But yeah, overall, pretty happy with it. Had a good run, and it still needs a lot of work, but yeah, the project continues.